And so the idea was, if I'm going to do this, I would want an organization whose main mission is to raise enough money so that everyone can make a living and have a life as a filmmaker in town.
That's great.
So that's what Miami Film Lab is.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that they came to me with the idea right as the pandemic hit, and I couldn't do anything else, and I was pregnant.
Perfect
And I'm
timing.
like, and then they fell off the face of the earth. But I had started talking to people, and everyone kind of liked the idea and was willing to support me.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I have nothing better to do, and I've been trying to figure out how to change my kind of career trajectory so I could be home with my kids and do
Right.
stuff. Because right before I started a family, I was traveling on a food show a week out of every month for 2 years. Couldn't do that with little kids.
Yeah.
And so I ran with it, and I went to, people, got a little bit of funding, and kept going.
Call 305, making a living as a filmmaker.
Our industry is not forgiving when it comes to wanting to have a family and finding a way to be home and be present. You know what I mean? It's so easy to get on a project and be gone for months at a time.
Yeah, and you can do it, and you can be a parent if you have got a support system. It's great, but even if I had the support system to do it, that's not how I wanted to raise kids.
Right.
But I also, my husband's just like, just do something else for a couple years. I'm like, I refuse to. I worked too hard to get here, and I want my kids to see that, you can figure out how to do both. It might not look the way you thought it would look, but it can happen.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, fight like hell to make this happen.
Yeah, no, the time that it takes. I missed a ton of things from my kids growing up, and it's just because when we were on a show, you're on set at 7 a.m. You're leaving set at 10 o'clock at night. I'd get home and everybody was asleep. I'd leave and everybody was starting to get up to go to school, and and that was the case for 16 weeks straight. So it was, and on the weekends I was just exhausted. It was like just recovery. And on Saturdays I was reading scripts of what we were shooting the following week and having conversations with the directors. Hi, baby. So it was always that part of it's always a challenge. But it's especially if you're a mom and you want to be with your child and everything else, it's what you've been able to do is good. And then what you guys have done, honestly, has been very good. The mentorship and everything else you guys have done, it's been
Slowly but surely.
yeah, it connects everybody in town, and that's always a good thing. I mean,
And that's why we started this. We want to not only get our name out there more, but get the name of people in town and have people understand what a career here in Miami looks like. So we'll start there, and we'll have you introduce yourself now that we're halfway through a conversation.
Exactly. Eric Gaunaurd. I am the owner and founder and executive producer at Paradiso Pictures. It's a company I founded in 2006, but I started doing it full bore in 2010. And so for 4 years, I was dabbling in it. I was still working as a consultant, doing other things, and working with other companies and other industries that have nothing to do with what we do for a living. And decided to make the change, thankfully, honestly, because I have a very insistent wife that was pushing me to do this. And that's why I made the transition to starting the company and really going out and trying to get clients. But before that, I had to figure out what a gaffer was and what a C-stand was and all of the things that you have to learn when you're doing this. And so it was a long process for me to
Was
get
the
to where I am now.
consulting work that you were doing film related, or was completely separate?
Completely separate. I had another business I've always been entrepreneurial, and I had another company that I was a part of when I was 21. And it was a consumer products distribution company. And we grew the business 30-fold, by the time I got out of the company. And then I consulted for a couple of years. I got out of that business in 2006, and I started consulting. And it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. What I wanted to do is what I'm doing now. But when I had 2 kids at home, I had 1 on the way, so it was really intimidating, the thought of just pivoting and changing careers.
Yeah, right before the Great Recession, too.
Yes, seriously. I was very unhappy. Because, when you know what you've wanted to do since, I was a teenager and not doing it, it wasn't one of those things where, I tell my kids, you got to find something you really like. Doesn't have to be your passion. Doesn't have to be something that you're in love with. How many people actually love their job? Very few.
And even people who think they love their job, once you see the reality of what it is,
Yeah.
it's not the same thing that was in your head.
It's not. It's definitely not. It's not as romantic as the image you have when you're starting, for sure. So I would tell them, just find something you like. But I was really unhappy consulting. And I just kept thinking, am I going to do this the rest of my life? And I'd had those conversations at home. And my wife was the one that said, you've been doing this for a while. You've been dabbling in this for years. Just do it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And that's it. And take a chance now. You're never going to do it. You're certainly not going to do it 10 or 15 years from that point. At that point, I was in my mid-30s. And so I made the decision to do it. It was interesting because the reaction from people around me was not very supportive, understandably. I had 3 kids at home. My wife at the time wasn't working. So she went to go back to work as a teacher on a teacher's salary, with 3 kids, 2 kids, one on the, one that was actually 3 kids at the time because my youngest was 3, in private schools. Like, all these decisions you make when you're going to have a family, they're costly and they're sacrifices you make. So it was scary for a while. And when I started out, I was producing for other people. So for the first 2 years, I was just producing on different commercial campaigns, working on different short films, doing different things. There's a million things I do poorly, okay? But one of the things that I think is a strength of mine is I'm very good at thinking long term. I'm very good at thinking, okay, if I want to be here in the next 3 to 5 years, how do I get here? I'm very strategic about every decision I make. I never make a decision in the short term, in anything I do in business, like ever. And so I was producing for different people. Then I started to get my own clients about 1.5 years, 2 years into it. And then I knew that, and most of us, when we go into this industry, we do this because we want to do film and television, right?
Yeah.
If you're in Miami, commercial work is pretty prevalent down here. And so it's kind of a no-brainer to at least dip your foot in it because it's a way of making a living. And in the end, it's a shorter story to tell, and I've enjoyed doing commercial work a lot, and I still do a lot of it. But I always wanted to do television and film as well. And we already had produced, like I produced a short film for HBO, I had produced a short film for Showtime Networks. I had been
where we met.
Yeah, which is where we met. I had been hired for those things. And that's right, we met there. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Acting lesson in Chubb.
That was a long time ago.
Long time ago.
So I wanted to find a way in the industry here. And I was adamant about doing general market. Now I've really changed my frame of mind, and we'll come back to that. But at the time, I was just film snob. I'm like, I'm doing general market, and that's it, and whatever.
This episode is sponsored by Unique Producer Service is South Florida's premier grip and lighting house. In business over 50 years, they have the experience to help you along the way, whether this is your first rental or your 100th. If you need to come test out lights before you shoot, need equipment delivered, or you need a full crew, Unique has got you covered. You can visit their website at uniqueproducers.com or call them at 305-681-7627. Nestled between Miami and the Florida Keys lies an enchanted and tranquil estate. Palm Lodge House and Tropical Garden is a historic 2-acre property from 1912. Its old Florida-inspired decor is intended to transport you back over 100 years with old-world charm everywhere you look. The spacious 2-story, 3-bedroom house features an expansive porch, a high-ceiling foyer, a grand piano, and an outdoor living room, and is surrounded by lush tropical gardens with seashell walkways throughout. And it is the perfect place for your next shoot or event.
What was Viacom Networks was in town, and they were the only people producing shows in English. For Nickelodeon was the only network that was doing general market stuff here. In terms of homegrown company producing here, not the Glades or all these other shows that came in from LA with their main crew intact. I wanted my company to get hired as the production company that was producing these shows, and
Which
I wanted
in
to
Miami
be
is very rare. Most of the stuff that's shooting in town are
coming
New
in
York,
from elsewhere.
Hollywood, or Latin American productions that come here to shoot here, hire crew here, but actual producers and the creative team building something from scratch. Like, I
It
Am
doesn't
Frankie is
happen.
one of the rare ones, which is the
Right, it
show
was a
that
show I
your
did.
big,
So it
your
was-
big hit.
So it was for us. It was an anomaly. So the way that I approached it was, well, these people are doing this content in town. How do I get in there? So it took me 18 months of being just persistent, literally persistent. When most people that are sane would have just said, they don't want to work with you. And I kept thinking, of course they want to work with me. They just don't know it yet. So I kept pushing, and I kept meeting different people. I met somebody. The first person I met after months of trying to meet with somebody was someone who now is one of the top people in development at VIX Plus here in town, Carla Gomez. She gave me 10 minutes of her time to have a coffee. And we met, and then she introduced me to someone else. Then that person met with me a few months later. Then that person introduced me to someone else, and so on and so forth. And it took me about meeting, it was the fourth or fifth person that I met that finally connected with. That was the person that was in charge of production management. And I was like, look, this is what I want to ultimately do. But I know you do promos. I know you produce down here show opens as well. You do, online content for the shows. Just give us a chance to do anything there. And let me show you what we can do. And let me introduce you to my team and whatever. So we finally got the chance to do that for one of their series. And, knock on wood, it went well. And they were really happy. And they were happy with me. They were impressed with my work and the way that I produced and the way that I ran the set. And then we started getting other opportunities, little by little, to do more of that. And we did that for a couple of years with them and with other clients in town. And then I heard they were opening these new studios, which you went to as well. They're beautiful studios. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to produce a show for MTV. They wanted to produce the international version of a really popular show called Ridiculousness. Mm-hmm. And so I found out who was going to be selecting the production companies there. And I kind of forced myself into that person's room. And I'm like, you need to give us an opportunity to at least present. And I put together the team. I had never done a show like that before. I didn't know anything about that industry. But I learned who were the people that were really good at that. Mm-hmm. And I brought them in to the team. Everything from the director to the other producers to the people that were the stage managers to everything. And the technical directors and everything else. And they eventually gave us the opportunity to do that show. So that was the first show we did it was unscripted side, but it was scripted. And then we just kept moving forward with these folks, and then they gave us a chance to do a show for Nickelodeon, which was called I Am Frankie, which was a big hit for the network. And then we produced that show.
So the concept was theirs, and you guys came in as the production company.
Yes. So they came in. They said, look, we have this idea. They had shot a Spanish version of the show that had done really well in Latin America. And they wanted to do it in the United States. And they said, we have this concept, we have this idea. So it was interesting. The way that I worked with them is they had these writers they were working with, and they had a writer's room. And they would send the scripts. I would give notes. The senior development folks would give notes. They'd make adjustments, not only creative notes, but notes in terms of the production, in terms of, hey, we're shooting this.
I cannot
This is
build
the
a
budget we
spaceship.
have.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. This is the budget we have. I love the idea. Let's bring it down 10 notches and so that we can actually film this. And so half the notes at least were production-related notes. And then the beauty that we had with that show in particular is that we started each season with almost every script.
Oh, that's rare.
Really rare.
Yeah.
So when we had that, we were able to block shoot and be more efficient.
So you cross-boarded all of those episodes.
Yes.
Very
yes.
nice.
So I wouldn't go crazy, but I would say we would kind of separate episodes 1 through 10, and we would, cross-board and block everything.
Yeah. So people who don't know, cross-boarding just means you get all of the things that are in the living room for 3 episodes and shoot them all together, since everyone else's film isn't shot in order, and that way you can save a lot of money.
So we did that, and that enabled us to. It was tough on the kids, I think, to some degree, but because of the type of show that it is it's a fun comedy show. It's not an emotional show where you have these dramatic performances where it can be a grind on these actors when you do that. I felt that it was doable And we changed their model entirely too, because they filmed like soap opera model, and I convinced them that there was a better way to do this, where we're going to get a lot of content filmed each day, but we're going to do it in a way that saves the actors, that gives them more time off, that, you know, when you pace yourself in a certain way, even if the days that you're filming are grind, if you're giving everyone the weekend off, everyone has a chance to recharge, everyone comes back Monday feeling good, versus shooting Monday through Saturday for X number of weeks. By week 5, everyone's destroyed.
And you're making garbage.
And you're worthless. You're not as creative. The actors are just tired. Everyone's cranky. Like, it just, I think in certain models you have to do that, but I think in this instance, when we were working with kids.
And you're in a studio. It's not like you're running out of time in a house, which is a lot of the soap operas. Part of the reason to do that is you need less days to rent a house. The studio's not going anywhere. You're not in this huge rush. There's 100%. No reason to do that and not save your team.
And we shot 30% of that series on location, probably.
Oh, wow.
So what we did is we always shot 2 units.
Yeah.
So I had each episode, I had blocks of episodes for each director. I had 2 directors running the whole season. And it was non-union. So I decided to bring in really good directors from Canada that could shoot in the United States, non-union. And they were really established directors over there. So we went through the whole visa process, brought them down, and then so we would shoot them both. We would shoot in the studio for, let's say, 2 weeks straight, and then for a week we would go on location, and I would have both directors shooting 2 units at the same time.
Very nice.
And that way we found all these efficiencies.
How'd you get so good at figuring all this out when you hadn't done something like this, hadn't really produced?
You know what it is? It's funny. I think that everything you do in life, and I tell so many people, there's so many young filmmakers this, and people that want to, be directors and are studying in college. I'm like, everything you do in life serves a purpose. And it will come back to you in one way or another, the experience that you gain from that. I was managing people from when I was 18. And I think my first management job was I was a manager in a bank, which is now Regions Bank, but it went through 5 versions of other banks before that. And I'm sure the people that were under me were thinking, who is this punk telling me what to do? I'm twice his age, I have kids, and I'm listening to this kid. But the people there saw something in me and how I dealt with people and how I managed personalities. And I've always been about finding efficiencies in everything I do. And I'd like to think I'm organized and I'm diligent about managing a budget. But I think my biggest strength is managing personalities. And because I've never been one where I felt like everybody needs to be managed the same. You can have certain guidelines within and parameters that everyone has to stick to the same road, but not everyone's going to be in the slow lane. Some people need to be in the fast lane and back and forth. And so I learned a lot about managing people, managing budgets, managing schedules when I was at the other company. And through that business, we went bankrupt almost 3 or 4 times, where we were on the verge of bankruptcy. But you learn through your mistakes. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to fix your mistakes and move forward, you learn from it. So I was able to gain a lot of experience. And I think that in a way, I was always producing.
Oh, yeah. Just
in a different industry. And so when I moved into this industry, when I first started, I was, even in the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, 2007, I would work on different sets as a PA, and I was just trying to learn. And I was in my mid-30s listening to people who were, almost half my age, telling me what to do and where to go and this and that. And I immediately learned, okay, this is what I need to know. And this is how you manage this. And I would see how people were doing things, and I'd be like, why are they doing it like that? Why aren't they doing it like this? This feels to me like it would be more efficient if they did this. And I'd have conversations with the companies, and I would ask them towards the end of the day of the set, why didn't you guys do this like this? In the end, ultimately, that gave me not only the confidence, but I started to get hired to produce for other people. And it's because I figured it out. At some point when I started, I'm like, well, I was always a producer. I just was doing something different. Yeah. What's your baby's name?
Amelia.
Amelia's. Now she's more chilled.
Now she's like, oh, this baby has so much FOMO. She's like, I must be involved in all of this. But going back to, I think there's one thing to the work of learning to do the thing, and then the other thing is convincing other people that you know how to do the thing.
Yeah.
And I think you've been able to convince people very early to let
and
you
that wasn't
having
easy.
yeah.
It wasn't easy, but I was able to convince a few people. And
But what does that look like? Like, how do you just fake that you know more than you do?
Listen,
and
there were times where I faked it. Look, I'm the first one to say that I think when I started to produce for other people, I had a pretty good general sense of how everything worked. I didn't, for example, understand the dynamic of how they worked with ad agencies, and because a lot of it was commercials at that time, and that's a totally different dynamic. And I came from a world where I was, one of the people running a business, so I would come in and say, no, this is how we're doing it because this is the most efficient way.
And then the ad agency looks at you going, I don't care.
Exactly. They're like,
I just don't care.
Well, we want it to be this way. And I kept thinking, but that's not the best way to do this. But
that's
it didn't
why
matter.
I don't do commercials. I started, like everyone in Miami, it's the biggest industry. You always end up doing I did a couple of them, like the inefficiency of it and the having to please 3,000 different chefs that all have very different things they're working towards. And none of it's good or bad. It's just, they have like, this is what I need to get out of this commercial. This is what I need to get out of it. And I'm just like, I can't, it's too many competing interests and competing needs. And like, I don't want to do it. This episode is sponsored by Unique Producer Service is South Florida's premier grip and lighting house. In business over 50 years, they have the experience to help you along the way, whether this is your first rental or your 100th. If you need to come test out lights before you shoot, need equipment delivered, or you need a full crew, Unique has got you covered. You can visit their website at uniqueproducers.com or call them at 305-681-7627. Nestled between Miami and the Florida Keys lies an enchanted and tranquil estate. Palm Lodge House and Tropical Garden is a historic 2-acre property from 1912. Its old Florida-inspired decor is intended to transport you back over 100 years with old-world charm everywhere you look. The spacious 2-story, 3-bedroom house features an expansive porch, a high-ceiling foyer, a grand piano, and an outdoor living room, and is surrounded by lush tropical gardens with seashell walkways throughout. And it is the perfect place for your next shoot or event.
There's a lot of subjective viewpoints that you're balancing.
Yeah.
So that part's challenging. It's always challenging. That never goes away. In terms of it being, it could be very good. I've had work with agencies that are extremely collaborative, and they tell us we really need to do this, but how do you suggest we get there? And then we'll make our suggestions. And then there's others that are just, they'll steamroll you and they want to do it their way. And that's okay because in the end,
As long as they pay for it.
yeah, they're paying for the production. They're paying for everything. They want it a certain way. We'll execute it as best as we can the way they want to have it done. So that's kind of the mindset. And but yeah, it was challenging to convince people. But I think once they gave me an opportunity to work on their teams in whatever production capacity, I always found a way to get one-on-one time with people and talk to them about the production and ask questions and tell them if they asked what I thought, I would give opinions. And it wasn't long when I decided to do it on my own that I started getting hired to produce for people. It was probably 3 months into it that I started to produce for people. Damn. And I did that, and it was very stressful. It was a very stressful period of time in my life, financially and in every sense of the word. It was a big leap, and my wife was extremely supportive. For the most part, no one else was. So that's you always think, oh, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, but
it's exhausting to
but it's exhausting.
have to convince yourself that you're not crazy.
Yes.
I mean, that's literally been my entire career. I mean, for most people down here, like it's everyone telling you, why aren't you going to New York and LA? Why are you trying to do it here? Why don't you want a steady job?
Yep.
Like how are you living without a steady paycheck? Like it is stressful to do those things by themselves. It is extra stressful to have to defend those choices to other people. Because it's very hard to defend,
right? Because you're not in Los Angeles, right, where this industry is prevalent. It's everywhere. You're in a town where this is not a big industry town. So that part of it was challenging, but You know, like anything else. It's not to sound cliche, but if you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, you're like, you do it, you know. And, you know, my conversations at that time when I made that transition in my life, everyone was like, well, what's your backup plan? I was like, well, I don't have one. And they were like, but you have 3 kids. What do you mean you don't have a backup? You have to have a backup plan. And I'm like, no. When I run out of money, I'll figure something else out. I go, but I don't have a backup plan. Because
if you have a backup plan, then you're not.
If you have a
do or
backup
die
plan,
of it is what
yes.
makes it happen. Yeah.
The do or die of it brings out the best in you, I think, in terms of you become just relentless, and you're. I was so driven, you know, by not wanting to fail that, and it's funny. I wanted to succeed, but I didn't want to fail so bad.
It's a very different thing. Wanting to succeed and knowing you cannot fail are 2 very different driving forces.
They're very different. And when you have kids, and when you know your wife's salary doesn't even cover half the costs you have, you find a way. And so that was a big help for me, I think. And probably the main reason why I succeeded, honestly, was because I just wouldn't accept no. I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't, you know, what I said earlier, it took me, 18 months to get into Viacom, to get them a chance to say, yes, we're going to hire you for a small little production we're doing within the big scope of a show that we're producing. Anyone else would have said, these people don't want to work with me. I just was like, no, this is my path. I have to do this. And I was just patient, because again, it's finding the balance. If you're hounding someone every day, they're never going to hire you, right? So it's there's no right or wrong answer, but it's following your gut and finding the right balance to get in. Yeah. And so that led to one opportunity. We proved ourselves. It went to another, so on and so forth, until we started producing stuff. And in the end, for them down here in Miami, we produced 3 series. We produced 4 pilots. And we ended up producing in between that time till now as well. We produced another digital series. We produced 3 features. We sold the show to Disney Plus, and we're still developing a bunch of other stuff. Let's
talk about what was that transition, because it's a very different world to go into an established company and be like, I will make the thing you want to make to the best of our ability, and now you've transitioned to a place where you're finding your own script, finding your own material, and then going out and finding the financing and going out to actors and doing that and packaging things, which in New York and LA is very normal for a producer. In Miami, it's very, very rare. So how did you make that leap from one to the other?
Well, 2 things. I think first, the leap, I'm still keeping my foot in the other side. We were one of the 2 final companies considered to produce the Billboard Awards this year. And again, that's one of those where I haven't produced a musical show like that, but I knew we can do it. I surrounded myself with the best in that industry on our team when we presented. And it just became a budget thing in the end. We were considered recently, and it still might happen, to produce a show for Peacock Network that would be down here in Miami. That would stream exclusively on Peacock.
Fingers crossed.
And these are jobs where they're calling us to provide production services. So I still love that world because you get to be an active part in the production and making something happen. But to your point, developing, packaging.
Finding the money.
Finding the money. It's so difficult, and it's so tedious. I mean, I've been told by multiple producers who are unbelievably successful in our industry that if you can sell 1 out of 10 shows, you've done great. And I used to hear that years ago. I'm like, man, that's terrible. That's like batting 100. That's the worst advice. And I heard it multiple times from people. And I'd bring it up, but this producer said this to me. Do you believe that? And they're like, oh my God, 100%. And I'm like, how can this be good? It is a reality. Yeah. So the way that we transitioned is I think, at least the way that I see it, is you have to have a good feel for what you think an audience wants to watch, and it isn't necessarily what you would normally watch. It's just what is an audience going to want to buy. So there are projects that we're developing that I'll tell you about a little later that are entirely selfish and things that I want to see done, but I do feel could be very good shows. But in terms of packaging and whatever, I found the book, this book that had come out. It's actually coming out like 6 months later. So I found a way to start getting lists from publishers on books that they were going to be putting out in 6 months, so that I can get ahead of the curve and try to buy rights to books before they come out. Because once they've come out, it's much harder, more expensive, everything else. And I found a book as a rom-com called Don't Date Rosa Santos, okay? And I don't do rom-coms normally. I mean, I was from the John Hughes era, and those romantic comedies were always a blast. But typically, I don't sit down and watch a rom-com. I don't watch a Hallmark movie. My wife does that. I don't. So, but this book, I loved it because the characters were Cuban-American and Cuban, and I'm Cuban-American. So I loved that there was a project that could highlight that. And the book was really charming, really funny. And I thought, man, I think I'd actually see this movie if it came out. And, I lean towards thrillers, Ozark, shows like that. So this is a completely different turn. But I thought an audience will like this. This will find an audience for sure. This also hits in the Latino component, which I liked a lot, especially the fact that the lead character is Cuban-American, trying to find who she is, what her heritage is about, where does she come from, where's she going to go into life. It's a very coming-of-age story. And I loved those growing up with John Hughes and all of those. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try to find the author. I did. I found the literary agent. I bought the rights to the book. And I told my manager, he loved it. And I said, I want to attach an actress. So this is where I learned how difficult it is. I tried to go after, at that time, Jenna Ortega, who was
Just
not
getting
what she
started.
is now, but exactly. But I saw her and I thought she's unbelievably talented, and this is going to be a star one day. So I reached out to her agent, who will remain unnamed at CAA, and she thought the story was super interesting and everything, but she would not show it to her unless there was a financial offer in place. And I understand to some degree because they're the gatekeepers, and otherwise they're going to get scripts from everybody all day, right? But you also have to know who you're representing. And the role was a really good role for her at that time. So they said they would not show it to her. And they represented another actress that I had also considered. They would not show it to her. So then I thought, okay, who else is in line that I want to go to? These other two actresses. And I kind of put a list of people. And there was like one number one, and then the others were all like, I like them all. And there was a few more. And I reached out to Sierra Ramirez's reps. She was going to star on a show called Good Trouble on Freeform Network. She was on The Fosters for years, also on ABC Family Channel. So she was part of that Disney family. And I thought, well, if she likes it, she's a tremendously talented actress. She's good comedically. Maybe because she's part of that family of actors in that network world, maybe they'll consider the project more. I sent it to her reps. They were open to showing it to her. Within a week, they're like, she loves it. She wants to do it. I'm like, amazing. So then they said, look, we have one request. Because we were going to start sending it out to places, and we had just sent it to Apple TV, and Apple was interested at the time. And they said, would you mind us showing it to Disney, and like the Disney Plus and whatever, through Freeform Network, because we're doing a show with Freeform Network. I'm like, well, Freeform isn't going to do this. This isn't for them, but sure. So about a week later.
Nothing is anything anymore.
No, it's really not.
Yeah.
But at the time, we're like, this is not. This is a feature film for streaming or for theatrical release. Yeah. And long story short, they loved it, but they realized this isn't for us. Do you mind if we show it to Disney Plus? And I'm like, well, of course.
Please.
Not. Sure.
I guess, if you must.
So then, exactly that. So then, and within about a week, they were like, we want this. We want this. So it took me months to negotiate.
But did those initial conversations with agents happen because you cold called them, or only because you have a manager? Were they taking those calls?
And so he set up some things for me. And me calling CA was me, entirely me, and just calling them and saying, look, I have this project. And I would let them all know I'm represented by these folks, at Wonder Street or whatever.
But how much of that, taking those calls, is it because you're represented, or is it because you have I Am Franking and other things under your belt? Like, for people who don't have that things, like what
that made a big difference.
Why are they taking your calls
so
and not someone else's?
What made a big difference is I would send an email and I would say, I'd introduce myself and say, I'm the producer of this show and I've produced this and I've produced that. And that was, I'm not going to lie, that was helpful. Okay. Otherwise, it was very challenging to get those sit downs. The fact that I had a representative as well made a difference.
And where did that representative come from? Like from after you did I Am Frankie, or when did that enter your picture?
Greg Weiss, I met him through a director of one of the pilots we produced for Nickelodeon. Mm-hmm. I hired this guy, Daniel Duran, who's one of the prominent music video directors like in the world. And he directed the pilot for me. And he said, I'm rep by this guy. Do you want to meet him? And I said, yeah. And I introduced myself and we met and we talked. Nothing happened at the time, but I kept in touch with him. And then when I finished doing these shows, I said, look, I'd finished doing these shows. I have this IP that I want to buy. I want to do something with this. And I sent it to him and he felt like it had legs. And he said, I'll help you with this. And then as soon as he helped me with that, and he helped me with the negotiations and everything else, he came on board for a bunch of other things afterwards. But I would be lying if I said the fact that I had produced things didn't help me, because it did. Because what the industry doesn't want to do is they don't want to work with someone that, if they don't know you, you need to have some type of credits and some type of
something behind you. I mean, the first thing, kind of big thing I produced was for the Food Network, and we were doing a food show. We'd go out to restaurants, like restaurants that I never thought would take my phone call. Were like, oh, it's Scripps is involved. Yeah, absolutely, come on by. And I didn't have producing credit or anything, but you have to have a thing. So if it's a project you've produced, or if you've been to a festival, like that first success is so important because it opens all these other doors. Like, it's very hard to get people to support. Like, Miami Film Lab is what it is because I've been working in this town for 10 years and I was able to go to the people I've worked with and be like, I want to do this thing. Will you support me?
Right.
So it is that jump from the first thing to the next thing is so much easier. It's that first one that is so freaking hard.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard, but it does make just an enormous
But the other jumps feel super big. But the minute you have anything behind you, like the gap closes. So it doesn't close in your brain. You still feel like you're the imposter syndrome and these people won't take my phone calls. But it really does. It's a much smaller world than we all kind of pretend it is.
It never closes entirely because, look, you learn along the way, because there was a period of time for a few years after I sold that project that we started developing it. Yeah. And development took 2 years to find the right person to adapt the book. Then going through all the outlines, then going through all the versions of the script, then saying, okay, it's ready. When are we going to go out with it? And then, in our case, what happened was the executives that championed the script were moved into another network. They were moved to Hulu. And then new people came in. And when the new people come in, they never want to produce what the old people were developing.
No matter how good it is. Yeah.
No, it's something you learn in the industry. So as good as we felt like it was, it died. It went into turnaround. So what I did was I started developing other projects and trying to take them out by myself. And you start to learn how hard it is to do that. Yeah. So like right now we've come full circle. I'm working with Mucho Mas Media, and I partnered with Javier Chapa on Don't Date Rosa Santos. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be producing it together. We attached an actress to it that we're really excited about, Paulina Chavez. We just attached a director to it as well. And
it's moving along.
And we've just gone out to a really big actress to play Rosa's mom, and we're waiting to hear back from her. And once we do that, I'm really confident we're going to produce it next year in 2025. But it's an odyssey it would have taken, if we produce it next year, 6 years to get done. So it does take a long time. It requires a lot of patience. And that's what I try to tell young filmmakers and young people coming into the industry, that there's never a straight path. You have to be open to And we should talk about that too, actually, if you want to.
No, I think we've been at this for a while. And I think we'll have you back. What's the next one is once that movie actually gets produced and we
That'll
do
be
stuff.
fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I could talk to you forever.
I know.
Because we've been doing this. I think
we've
our
known each other
careers
for a long time.
Well, yeah, and our careers. I mean, I moved back to Miami for film school in 2007. So like our careers have been roughly the same. And this one needs to go to sleep. But
That's totally fine.
thank you for understanding.
Of course.
The joys of doing this with another parent who understands. Oh, you want to be on the mic? You want to be on the mic?
She's enjoying the mic. She's enjoying it.
So we'll keep, because we can talk forever. But let everyone know where they can find you and where they can kind of follow the work you're doing and hopefully work with you.
Well, you can hit up my website, paradisopictures.com. We just redesigned it recently. Has a lot of examples of our work there. And listen, for anyone that wants to hit me up for work, for advice, for whatever, please do. Like, there's a contact page. Send me an email, send me a text, and we'll connect and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing
Thank
this.
you.
This is fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Say bye.
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 Bye. Now she's smiling.